So do you want to describe what the inside looks like?
The inside is full of bodies, Kayla. So are we doing a previously on? Are we doing that? Are we doing previously on? Cult or just weird?
Do you want to?
We discussed Alcor and the history and what is cryonics and the history of cryonics. And we also heard from us on our way to, we'll get to that later in this episode. First, I want to introduce ourselves. I'm Chris. I am a data scientist and game designer.
I'm Kayla. I am a television writer and internet addict.
Kayla, you know what makes a really good cocktail party story? Taking a trip.
I was going to answer and I didn't have a good answer.
It sounded like you're...
No, I just looked at you from the side of my eye.
I thought you were going to answer too, and then I looked at you and it looked like you were just being like...
I'm a really good co-host. You guys hire me for all your co-host needs. No, Chris, what makes a really good cocktail story? Cocktail party story. Tell me how to make a good cocktail.
So what you do is you get a piece of ice from a frozen body. No, taking a trip to a facility in Arizona where they freeze dead bodies to be revived at a later date, hopefully, maybe. It's like, remember we went to like 2 or 3, because it was like it was at the end of last year where we were doing like, there was a Frasier watch party, and then there were like holiday parties, and you get like one of those parties and it's like, what do you talk about?
Right.
And then you say, well, we took this trip to Arizona.
Girl, this is the only thing I have talked about since. I went back to work and I was like, hello, everyone. Shut up. Listen to this.
You don't even need to tell them to shut up because, like, you hold court. People start glomming on. They're like, wait, what?
Right.
It's just really, it's very interesting. And what is Culture Just Weird but our own little audio cocktail party?
I wish I had some ice to clink.
After last week's episode, I think we owe you all a good story, too, about visiting a place. So we took this trip last September in 2023, and it was intended to be part of our experiential season, go do stuff. So we went to do stuff. And as you explained last week, we wound up shelving this until, let me check my notes, right now, because it inspired this Culture Just Weird seasonal theme. How do survival-oriented beings that are conscious of their own non-survivability cope with that paradox? That's humans, by the way. That's us. Do
you remember how season 1 we were talking about, like, the city of Irvine?
Now we're talking about death.
Like...
This is like a JRPG where you start off just like roaming around your town doing stuff, and at the end it's like kill God. Yeah. But basically, what's up with the whole death thing? There are myriad ways people think about this, and one of those ways is, hey, what if we could make it so death wasn't inevitable? What if we could use science and technology to slow the process of dying so much that it actually freezes in place indefinitely, awaiting some future time to cure whatever ailed you in the first place, whether that be injury, disease, or even old age? Such is the thesis of the folks at Alcor, the world's leading nonprofit cryonics organization. You mentioned this last week, but it was founded in 1972 by Fred and Linda Chamberlain. Linda still works there today, and Fred is also still there.
Guess how?
He's putting his money where his mouth is. He is frozen. I will call him a frozen patient there because, as we mentioned, that's the terminology that they use. I want to be respectful of that, and I also don't totally disbelieve it myself. But yeah, they refer to themselves as Alcor Life Extension Foundation. So it's not like Alcor Life Revival, Life Re-Life.
Come back to life.
Life again, the re-lifening.
Yeah. Life too.
It's life extension. So I think that again kind of hits on that point of like, they think of it as a pause. They talk about their patients being in stasis. That's kind of the conceit for this whole thing. Not like they're dead and we bring them back. And here, I'm just going to read you their mission statement directly from their website, just to kind of like level set with you guys what they're about. So their mission statement reads as follows: to save lives through the following prioritized principles. Number 1, maintain the current patients in biostasis. Number 2, place current and future members into biostasis when and if needed. Number 3, eventually restore to health and reintegrate into society all patients in Alcor's care. Number 4, fund research into developing more cost-effective and reliable means for the previously mentioned 1 through 3. And number 5, provide public education as a means of fostering growth to support the goals of 1, 2, 3, 4 above. I kind of feel like we're covering number 5 for them right now, and they owe us a check.
I mean, that's why we're doing this show. Where are the sponsorships? Sponsor me, Alcor.
Sponsor me. And Alcor and Casper. And, much to our surprise and delight, they offer tours.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
So we arrived in Scottsdale, Arizona last September. Actually, first of all, why Scottsdale?
Yeah, what the hell's in Scottsdale?
Isn't it hot in Arizona and you want to freeze people there?
Seems counterintuitive.
Okay, so it comes down to multiple factors. First of all, the heat outside actually is like not as big a concern. Like that,
I don't think liquid nitrogen. I don't think it matters to liquid nitrogen if it's 100 degrees outside or 77.
Right. They use liquid nitrogen to keep their patients in stasis, so it kind of doesn't matter. The heat outside is more like an air conditioning cost, which they say is like compared to the other costs is pretty minimal. So why Arizona though? They actually started their own life. Alcor started its own life in Riverside, California. And when it was determined that any California facility would be too vulnerable to earthquake damage, in 1994, Alcor froze itself, moved, and successfully began life anew in Scottsdale, Arizona. Scottsdale is a place that has very little exposure to natural disaster. As we said, it's not prone to earthquakes like California is, and they typically don't deal with hurricanes there, tornadoes, or flooding. Also importantly, Scottsdale has facilities that produce liquid nitrogen, which, as we just mentioned, that's a crucial ingredient that Alcor needs a convenient and consistent supply of to keep its patients in cryostasis. There's also world-class airport facilities in the Scottsdale-Phoenix area, which, by the way, if you're trying to picture this in your brain map, Scottsdale is basically like inside Phoenix. It's like
they're the same city.
Part of Phoenix, yeah. Airport access is important because Alcor patients, once they have been declared legally dead, have a very short time to get vitrified and frozen up. Time is of the essence to prevent tissue damage and lack of oxygen to critical tissue, including brain tissue, etc. And Scottsdale also has nice year-round climate, so you probably won't have to delay your final flight to the freezer due to inclement weather, which, again, if you take too long, that could be damaging. So that's all why they're in Scottsdale, and that's why we were there too.
Have we explained what vitrification is at any point?
No, we haven't yet. It basically just means like freezing, right? It
means freezing, but it's the reason why vitrification is used in this process is because it is like way less damaging than just like turning somebody into an ice cube. It's like you're essentially putting fluid into the body that like turns the body into glass. And so that way you're not dealing with things like ice crystals. So the problem with freezing is that ice crystals... So it's like stained glass?
Like could you put me in a cathedral window?
Beautiful. That would be gorgeous. Freezing a body causes ice crystals to form, which damages the cells, the tissues, the whatever. But vitrification is a freezing process that does not result in ice crystals.
And it's thanks to the vitrification fluid, which we will get to that. So picture, if you will, Office Park in sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, a nondescript gray building with the word Alcor on the side, appropriately enough. Kayla and I walk in, and the first thing we see in their pretty nice lobby, it looks kind of med tech, like as far as lobbies go, was their co-CEO, James Arrowood, who he'll come back to the story in a minute, speaking with a group of local doctors. While that was happening, Kayla and I began our facility tour with one of Alcor's employees. The tour started off pretty basic. She showed us the obligatory timeline wall that's like on every tour of everything.
I loved the timeline wall.
You got to have a timeline wall.
I really, really liked the timeline. Like we took up way too much of her time asking questions about the timeline wall.
I mean, that's why they're popular, is because it's just a good visualization to be like, oh, you could look at here is when this happened. But yeah, a lot of those are the same talking points that we've mentioned on the show already last week and here today. We also saw some cool toys that they had made. Little 3D printed models of their doers, which is not a bottle of whiskey.
Chris, what's a doers?
But it is a bottle of human beings. We'd later see the room in which all of these doers are housed, but this is a good time to talk about what they are, because the science and engineering of these things is like, it's one of the more interesting things that we actually learned on this trip.
The doers are so cool.
Kayla, can you describe them, what they look like on the outside physically?
Yes. A doer is a huge, 8 to 10 foot cylinder with wheels on the bottom.
It's like if Paul Bunyan had a Coke can.
Yeah.
With no labeling. It was just like a metal Coke can.
It's Paul Bunyan's Alcor Coke can. And they are freestanding. They are not connected to any sort of like electricity source or whatever. They just can roll around wherever you need them to roll.
And they have a little Alcor logo on the side.
So do you want us to describe what the inside looks like?
The inside is full of bodies, Kayla.
Yeah, but how?
Actually.
How? Because in my head, when I saw these doers, I was like, oh yeah, they just shove. I don't know why I thought this. I was just like, oh, there's just like a pile of liquid.
Just a pile
and there's
of
just bodies
They
suspended
just jam
in it.
people in there with their limbs all akimbo.
Yes, all splayed. I just kind of pictured more I don't know what you see in Demolition Man.
Like a chunk of ice with.
How am I supposed to know
Sylvester
what this
junk?
look? I expected Sylvester Stallone in every single doer.
Okay, yeah, I mean that makes sense, but the doers so they're surprisingly efficient with their space. So don't think of a big vat cylinder. I mean they're skinny-ish cylinders for their height, and they contain each of them 4 full bodies and 8 noggins of patients. So this might be a good time to talk about whole body versus neuropatient.
Right.
There's 2 different things that you can do when you become a member at Alcor. I'm not sure if this works this way at other cryopreservation facilities, but
some places only do full body.
Okay, and some places only do head. I don't know.
I'm not sure
about that. But at Alcor, it's A or B. You can choose, and there's 4 bodies vertically placed in the doers upside down, which we'll talk about why in a second. And each one also contains 8 heads of the neuropatients. Now, that's cheaper.
Wait, how are the heads in the chamber?
Aren't they just in the center of it? Just
They're
stacked up?
in their own chambers in the middle. Again, the efficiency of these doers is beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful.
So when you're in your stasis, you have 4... How many other friends? No.
12.
11. You have 11 friends.
Yeah.
You're the 12th.
You're the 12th friend.
So you better, and it could be for 100 years or
1,000 years.
Who knows?
Yeah.
So you better really like the people that are in the doers with you. But yeah, so the neuropatient thing, when we were at cocktail parties, that's one of the things that people react to and go what? How did so they chop your head off? Yes, they chop your head off.
Yeah.
The thought is that once if we find ourselves in a future where medical technology exists to revive people from cryostasis, that means that we're also well past a future where we can build somebody a new body or maybe cyborg body parts or whatever it is. We don't actually need your body parts. What we need to preserve you and yourself, your sense of identity and self, is your brain. The brain is the important thing. That's kind of the thought behind that. You can always give somebody a Terminator body.
You can always give someone a Terminator body.
Yeah, come on. I've seen Ghost in the Shell. You can replace somebody's whole ass body. Okay, so as far as the whole bodies are actually stored in these full body sleeping bag type things.
We got to see one.
We got to see a sleeping bag, not with a body.
Not the body.
In it, because the doers are made of titanium. You cannot see through them. I don't even remember what the sleeping bags are for. Is it so they can be cozy?
I don't remember. I think probably
there was a
for
good
some
reason,
sort
though.
of protection. Protect, because again, the bodies are vitrified. The bodies are turned into glass. They're delicate things. So I'm assuming it's for some sort of protection. We should follow up on that.
Soften the, yeah, maybe we'll follow up on it. Could also be it's easier to raise and lower a body into a doer when it's contained within a little cocoon like that. I don't know. But I did mention they are stored upside down. The bodies are. The reason for that is that in the event of some sort of disaster where they cannot top off the dewars with liquid nitrogen.
The liquid nitrogen burns off. So literally there is somebody whose entire job is to just top off the liquid nitrogen periodically. Because it like evaporates.
It evaporates because it's so cold that you can't avoid the evaporation even if the dewar is sealed tight, which it is. So if you're in an emergency situation where you're, for whatever reason, you're unable to top off the liquid nitrogen in these dewars and you need to like maybe go to a new facility or get a new supplier of liquid nitrogen or whatever it is, if the person starts unfreezing, then you want them to lose their feet and their knees and their waist before they lose their head. That's why they're stored upside down.
Smart. Clever.
But as you mentioned, liquid nitrogen is what actually keeps them at a brisk negative 320 Fahrenheit,
Whew.
which for our non-Americans, that is a negative 195 Celsius. Not that any of us has any context for either of those numbers. Although actually I did watch a football game live once at the Meadowlands in New Jersey. And I think that hit liquid nitrogen temperatures that time.
You froze?
I think I froze and had to be revived. I thought that the fact that it was topped off manually was very fascinating. Like you brought that up. Like there's actually an employee that physically like I'm picturing it.
They had like a sprinkler system, right?
I don't know exactly how he does it. Like I think they showed us some of the tools, but like I don't know. I'm just like picturing like him like walking up a little ladder with like a pitcher.
Me too.
With like a pitcher of liquid nitrogen and just kind of like pouring it in like you'd water plants. I know that's not what he does.
I think they had like kind of a sprinkler system, and also the guy who maintains and cares for these bodies is also an Alcor member, and
he's like one of their OG members.
Yeah. So like I don't know. I'd feel comfortable in his hands.
Yeah, for sure. It's just like you don't picture anything manually anymore.
No.
And with the stuff that we're talking about here with these dewars, like a lot of it is manual. A lot of it is like, analog, for lack of a better word. And it's for good reason. It's for like safety and redundancy reasons that automation actually is not necessarily good for. It's just like an interesting contrast. So there's extensive monitoring of the frozen bodies by computer systems, but the dewars themselves are not electronic in any way because they want to eliminate the risk of power loss causing patient loss. So there are no electronics in the dewars. Again, going totally analog to like prevent
You could literally
risk.
take them from this facility and like roll them to another facility.
Yeah, that's part of why they have the wheels on the bottom.
I still don't know whether I still don't know how I feel about the science behind all of this, but god damn is this shit cool.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, the engineering is just crazy. Like, and one of the, just a semi-tangent here, because we're talking about like, well, mitigate this risk and that risk. One of the things that I find most interesting is like how much thought has to go into like a million different things that a normal business doesn't have to think about because of two critical factors. One, very, very sensitive product. Like hospitals do have to think of that. They have similarly sensitive products. But the other thing that almost no other business has to think about is how very, very long term it can be.
Yeah.
So Alcor has to think about things like, what if the power goes out? And you can't be like, well, no, the power plant's good. You can't say well, just make sure that we are in a place with good power. You have to do that, but you also have to think of, but what if?
They have to think about like, what if there's a world war?
You have to play safety engineer to like an insane degree.
Right.
Yeah. So you have to think about weather risk, climate risk, power grid risk, crime risk, business and financial failure risk, natural disaster risk. Yeah. What if there's a world war? Like you have to think about these like really crazy things that most businesses don't have to think about.
Oh, there's one more thing that other businesses don't necessarily have to think about. But it was also mentioned to us that like patient safety is also very important because like, most people that are involved are just like regular guys. But, if a high profile person decides to become a cryonicist, like if Shaquille O'Neal went and became a cryonicist, we probably shouldn't like broadcast to the world where his body is stored. You know what I mean? Like
famously, a lot of people do want to kill Shaquille. Actually, I might be the only one.
I just mean more like, you think about.
To be fair, I do want to kill Shaquille O'Neal because he went to the Lakers.
I did not
in the
mean
90s
kill.
when I was a child, and that is the single worst thing that ever happened to me in my life.
I meant think about how famous graves are often like visited, desecrated, things are left behind. Like, yeah, you don't know what kind of crazy person is like, oh, I got to go get Shaq. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, most businesses aren't having to think about, like,
I think they should let people put
what
flowers.
if someone comes and tries to get one of our patients?
Yeah, and that's, again, not something that you normally have to think about as a business or even as a hospital. And like we said, not being plugged in makes them mobile. That's why they're on wheels. So, like, if there is some sort of, like, unforeseen, unmitigated, despite the fact that we tried to think of world wars and climate and business failure, there's some disaster that's unmitigatable. We can always wheel those puppies out of there to a new facility. Maybe they'd come back to California, which is very famous for not having many natural disasters.
Come on over.
And I mentioned they're made of titanium. The reason they use that material is because the extreme temperature gradient between the inside and the outside. The outside is basically like a very cold room, and the inside is cryo temperatures.
Can you touch a dewar? Like, if you touch one, is it going to be cold on your hand?
I imagine so. I don't think we asked that question.
Like, you imagine that it's cold to the touch, or
it's
you imagine that, like,
extraordinarily cold to the touch.
Like, going to hurt you?
Maybe. I don't work there.
Somebody from Alcor who works there. Tell us.
But the reason they're made of titanium is because that extreme temperature differential creates a pressure differential because physics, and that calls for needing very strong structural material so it doesn't either collapse or explode. I forget which one it would be. So that's the dewars, which again is like the bread and butter of their operation. That's where all their patients, 227 of them as of the time of this writing, are kept in stasis. After that initial room with the timeline and the toys, we got to see a few offices and then walked through a hall that had some photos of the facility, including the photo of the duo room. And we'll share those on Instagram since they are publicly available photos. And there was also a photo wall of patients because, as the tour guide explained, it's important to be reminded constantly that these are real people who, as they believe, are not just frozen corpses. They are patients under their care. Each patient's photo had a little blurb underneath, just like kind of about who they were. And this is where we were also told that patients have what they take with them, or they're intended to take with them when they, go to their freezing memory boxes. So like they'll prepare a box of like, mementos and things that the intent is, again, if and when they are ever able to be revived, that might assist in the process of like reintegrating them into, I don't know, stretching the old brain meat out and remembering like, oh yeah, that's right. My favorite sandwich was tuna fish. I don't know. I don't think you should put a tuna fish sandwich.
That's what you're going to put in your memory box?
Yeah. Like an actual tuna fish sandwich.
This is the thing that I found. Just like I found this whole portions of tour extremely profound.
Yeah.
Just the wall. It was the tuna fish sandwich. The wall of photos and the variety of like kinds of people, and like it just really brings it home that we're talking about like science and technology and sci-fi and speculative whatever, and we're also talking about people's end of life choices.
Right. And
it's never easy to decide like, what do I want to have happen when I die? But we have traditional paths in our societies, and like, thinking of American society, you're going to get buried, you're going to get cremated, maybe you'll have some sort of eco-funeral. Like there's established pathways, and this is not an established pathway. This is like making such an unorthodox decision, and like that feels very profound to me to like take that kind of control over, this is what I want to have happen when I die or when I legally die. I don't know. I just found it very profound.
Oh yeah. And I totally agree. And it was profound on multiple levels too, because first of all, there's the profundity of each individual person there with that choice that binds us all.
Right.
That how do we want our end of life to go? How do we want that to be? And how do we cope with it and deal with it and blah, blah, blah. The most profound thing any of us will ever think of for each individual there. And then on top of that, there's like, it forces you to think about questions like persistent self.
Right.
That's fascinating to me. And it turns out that like a lot of the preservation process isn't even really about protecting tissue anymore, because we'll get to this, but the protection of tissue and vitrification process is actually fairly well established. Now it's more about how to figure out how to preserve the stuff in your brain that makes you.
Right.
So it's like that persistent self that feels like such an existential question is actually kind of like a medical question for Alcor, which is just a fascinating thing to think about. And I also want to just call out here, because you said there's a variety of patients. Yeah, there's a wide variety of patients from all walks of life across the religious spectrum, which surprised me. Most of the patients are older, but there are some that skew younger. The youngest patient they have there is actually a 2-year-old that members wanted to have cryopreserved after their, daughter?
Yeah, it was her parents.
After their daughter died of a terminal illness at age of 2. So there's a variety of folks that are currently patients at Alcor. After we spent some time in our existential ennui and stew of thoughts about dying.
It was also, okay, there's one more thing. Can I say one more thing? Can I say one more thing?
It wasn't all ennui,
profundity?
by the way. It was nice in a way.
It was nice. Like, literally, there was, the last thing I'll say about how moved I was by this portion was we were told that some patients' loved ones were able to, like, kind of come and visit. Like, there was one person who...
It's kind of like visiting a cemetery, but also its own thing.
There was one person who had, I believe, died from AIDS. And, that they were a younger person, and their mother was able to come and visit. And it's just...
Yeah.
I don't know. And I have another thing to say, because I am not brief.
One more, and then one more after that.
The other thing about the profundity is that a lot of these people believe that they are essentially donating their bodies to a scientific endeavor. I think there is almost nothing more like noble than donating your body to science.
Yeah, it was explained to us that that is even maybe the primary motivation for some of the patients there.
Yeah.
That it's like, you know what, I don't know if this shit's going to work. Like, that's speculative, but what is definitely going to happen is you are going to CT scan my brain while I'm frozen, and that may move science forward.
Yeah.
So speaking of science, oh my God.
I'm kidding.
Speaking of science, though, after we had our moment there, we next went into one of their science labs, which was very cool looking. You can kind of just like picture like a high school science lab, but if it was like a really nice high school,
like a college one,
like a nice,
which I'm assuming
college.
Is what like real science labs look like, but I've never seen them. I only have the frame of reference of high school, college, and now Alcor.
Right. But it sort of had like a similar structure. You have like the flat surfaces with instruments on them, cabinets for other instruments, a few computers, blah, blah, blah.
And at this point, I was kind of assuming that we were getting close to the end of our tour. We'd been on this for about 40 minutes. I assumed we would be finishing the tour up with the initial employee who had started the tour with us. But then all of a sudden the door opens and somebody walks into the research lab.
Oh my God, was it the Thing?
And was
it a monster?
No.
They made zombies by freezing people?
That's what happens. It was clones. No, it was the co-CEO of Alcor, James Arrowwood, who we had passed earlier in the lobby. And he took over the tour from there, and we were in his hands from then on.
2 hours.
Yeah.
And we will get to that next time on Cult or Just Weird.
If you'd like to support the show, you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/culturejustweird. And if you want to talk to other weirdos about cults in your life, find us on Discord. Both of those will be linked in the show notes, and you can find it also on all of our social media. This is Kayla.
This is Chris.
Thanks for listening.